July 15, 1943. The rain fell in sheets as the forest around Okinawa trembled with distant explosions. 22-year-old Hana Sato, a Japanese field nurse, pressed her back against the collapsed medical tent while whispering orders to two younger nurses, Keiko and Miyu, her hands trembling despite years of discipline. Her training had taught her that surrender was the ultimate disgrace. Better to die with honor, her instructors would repeat, but now, as American troops closed in, all Hana felt was exhaustion, bone deep and absolute. Their unit's officer had fled hours earlier. The wounded soldiers in their care were gone, dead or taken by the retreating regiment. The three young women were alone, starving, and soaked to the skin. Keiko clutched a rusted scalpel like it was a weapon, while Miyu sobbed silently, convinced the enemy would torture them. Hana had heard the same stories. Americans burned prisoners alive, mutilated them, laughed as they died. Every propaganda film said so. Every commander repeated it. Surrender wasn't an option, it was a fate worse than death. But as the rumble of boots neared, fear strangled Hana's breath. She raised her hands, voice quivering. Don't run. We stay together. The bushes parted. Instead of monsters, a group of American soldiers stepped forward cautiously, rifles raised but faces calm. One of them, a tall, sandy-haired man with steady eyes, lowered his weapon first. My name's Corporal Daniel Reeves, he said slowly, pronouncing each word clearly. We won't hurt you. Hana didn't believe him. How could she? But when Keiko fainted, Daniel rushed forward, not with violence, but with concern, catching her before she hit the ground. Another soldier offered Miyu a canteen, pushing it gently into her shaking hands. Hana stared, frozen. These were not the men she had been taught to fear. Within minutes, the three nurses were escorted toward an American field station. No ropes. No shouting. No brutality. Just quiet instructions and blankets placed over their shoulders to shield them from the rain. Hana kept waiting for the cruelty to start. For the lies to unravel. For the mask to drop. Instead, a young medic named Grace Thompson treated the cuts on her arms with careful hands. You're safe now, Grace said softly. Safe. The word echoed in Hana's mind, foreign and impossible. Yet, as she felt the unfamiliar warmth of clean bandages and steady hands, she realized something terrifying. Everything she had been taught might have been a lie. The women were escorted to a small temporary POW holding area, nothing like the brutal cages Hana had once imagined. Instead of barbed wire and snarling dogs, there were canvas tents, lanterns swinging in the wind, and guards who looked barely older than she was. Hana, Keiko, and Miyu were each given a clean uniform, soft, gray fabric that smelled of soap, not sweat or mold. The moment Hana touched it, she froze. In her own army camp, nurses slept on torn mats and washed their uniforms with cold river water. This felt like a luxury. Inside the tent, Corporal Daniel Reeves appeared again, carrying 3 metal trays filled with steaming food. Real food. Rice, vegetables, even slices of meat. Miyu burst into tears at the sight, covering her mouth. Keiko hesitated as if expecting a trick. Daniel placed the trays gently on a wooden crate. Eat. You need your strength. Hana narrowed her eyes. Why? We are your enemies. Daniel shrugged. Tonight, you're people who need a meal. The simplicity of the answer unraveled something inside her. As they ate, Grace Thompson entered with blankets, thick, heavy, impossibly warm. She draped one over Miyu and smiled. You'll sleep better with these. It gets cold near dawn. Hana felt her throat tighten. Kindness was more frightening than cruelty. Cruelty she knew how to endure. Kindness forced her to question everything. After dinner, the soldiers didn't chain them. Didn't shout. Didn't threaten. Instead, a guard across the tent hummed quietly as he wrote in a small notebook. The soft melody felt almost surreal. Keiko whispered, Do you think it's a trap? Hana wanted to say yes. But deep inside, she felt something shifting. That night, she couldn't sleep. Every time she opened her eyes, she saw the lantern's glow reflecting on clean fabric and felt the warmth of the blanket around her shoulders. She thought of her training. Enemy soldiers are ruthless. American forces show no mercy. Yet mercy was exactly what she had been given. Her stomach twisted, not from the food, but from shame. Why had she been taught to fear people who treated her with more dignity than her own superiors? Outside, Daniel walked past on his patrol, stopping to glance quietly into the tent. When he saw Hannah awake, he didn't bark at her to sleep or threaten punishment. He simply nodded, as though saying "You're safe." The gesture made her chest ache. Maybe the world was not as simple as she had been told. 3 days passed, each one unraveling another thread of Hannah's old beliefs. Every morning, the POWs were given hot meals, oatmeal, bread, sometimes even fruit. The guards addressed them by name, not number. They were allowed short walks outside the tent, accompanied but not shoved or restrained. Daniel often lingered near their group. He had a quiet way about him, never pushing for trust but offering it in small, steady gestures. When he noticed Keiko struggling to tie her borrowed boots, he knelt and helped lace them without embarrassment or impatience. When Miyu panicked during a thunderclap, he reassured her until she calmed. Hannah watched everything carefully. She kept waiting for the truth to reveal itself, for the cruelty beneath the kindness to emerge. But it didn't. One afternoon, Grace arrived carrying a small portable record player. "Thought you might want to hear something different from the guns," she said with a grin. Music filled the camp, soft jazz tunes drifting through the air. Keiko covered her mouth, stunned. Miyu laughed for the first time since their capture, the sound shaky but real. Hannah felt her chest tighten again, not in fear this time, but confusion. In her own camp, music had been a distant luxury. Nurses marched, treated wounds, cleaned instruments, and slept little. Their superiors barked orders, demanded silence, punished mistakes harshly. Comfort was weakness. Kindness was indulgence. Yet here she was, sitting cross-legged in the dirt, listening to foreign music while enemy soldiers shared stories about baseball games back home. The world she had known felt suddenly small. Later that day, as she cleaned a cut on her own hand, Daniel approached. "You're good at that," he said, nodding at the bandage. "I'm a nurse," Hannah replied stiffly. "You still are," Daniel said gently. "Being a prisoner doesn't erase who you are." His words hit her harder than any weapon. She swallowed. "Why treat us this way? We are your enemy. Don't you hate us?" Daniel shook his head. "War's ugly. But that doesn't mean people have to be." Hannah looked away, unable to meet his eyes. She had been taught that Americans were bloodthirsty villains. Yet nothing here supported that story. Her entire worldview felt like sand slipping through her fingers. That night, as she wrote a letter, her first aloud communication, she hesitated before describing the truth. "We are safe. We are treated well." It felt almost like treason to admit it, but she wrote the words anyway. And for the first time, she wondered what else her leaders had lied about. Weeks passed, and the camp became a strange new world, still surrounded by barbed wire, but filled with small moments of humanity Hannah had never expected. The nurses were allowed to ride home once a week under supervision. At first, Hannah had written cautiously, "We are alive. Conditions are acceptable." But the more she experienced, the harder it became to hide the truth. Her newest letter, lying open on the wooden table before her, read differently. "We receive hot meals every day. The guards know our names. They treat us with respect. We even heard music. I don't know how to explain this place to you, but it is nothing like what we were told." She paused, pen shaking. Would her family even believe her? Would they think she had been brainwashed? A gentle voice broke her concentration. "Everything all right?" It was Grace. Hannah nodded uncertainly. "I do not know what to say. If I tell the truth, they may think I am lying." Grace pulled up a crate and sat beside her. "Honesty's rarely simple," she said. "But it's still worth telling." Outside the tent, Daniel called roll for the evening walk. The nurses lined up, their silhouettes softened by the golden afternoon sun. Other POWs joined them, most men, many wounded but treated with the same quiet respect. Some even joked with the guards. The contrast to what Hannah had been taught was overwhelming. As they walked, Daniel paced beside Hannah. "Your hand any better?" She looked down at the fading cut. "Yes. Thank you." He nodded, then hesitated. "Can I ask something? Why were you so scared of us when we found you?" Hannah stiffened. "Because we were told you would torture us. That you enjoyed cruelty." Daniel blinked, stunned. "Who told you that?" "Everyone." Her voice trembled. "Our officers, our films, our textbooks." Daniel stopped walking for a moment, eyes heavy with sadness. "War lies to everyone," he said quietly. "On all sides." Hannah looked at him, studying the sincerity in his expression. There was no mockery there. No menace. Just a man weary of a world that demanded enemies where there didn't need to be any. That evening, after the walk, the guards handed out small comforts: soap, hairbrushes, even a few books. Miyu hugged a blanket to her chest as if it were treasure. Keiko practiced English words a guard had taught her, laughing when she mispronounced them. For Hannah, the greatest comfort came from Daniel's simple kindness, not loud, not boastful, just steady and genuine. She finished her letter with a final line. "Whatever you have been told about the enemy, some of it is not true." She folded it with shaking hands. The truth felt dangerous, but freeing. By the time summer settled over the island, the camp felt less like a cage and more like a waiting room between worlds. The war was still raging, but inside the fence, life took on its own rhythm: meals, walks, music, simple conversations. Hannah had changed. She felt it in the way she stood straighter, in the way she could finally sleep without fear. She also noticed the guards had changed, more relaxed, less wary, as if they too saw these prisoners not as threats but as people. One afternoon, Daniel approached with news. "You three will be transferred soon," he said. "A larger POW camp inland. Better facilities." Miyu gasped in fear, but Daniel lifted a calming hand. "It's safe. I promise." Hannah hesitated. "Will we see you again?" Daniel smiled softly. "I hope so." On their last night, the soldiers gathered around a small fire, playing music and sharing pieces of their rations. It didn't feel like a farewell between enemies. It felt like something far more human, people who had met in the darkest circumstances and still found light. Grace hugged each of them. "Stay safe. And keep telling the truth," she whispered to Hannah. Hannah swallowed hard. "I will." Morning came quickly. As the nurses boarded the waiting truck, Hannah turned back one last time. Daniel stood a few yards away, hands tucked into his pockets, watching them with a sadness he didn't hide. Hannah bowed, not out of duty, but gratitude. He returned the gesture with a small nod. As the truck bounced down the dirt road, Hannah pressed a hand to her chest. She had been taught to fear Americans, taught that surrender meant disgrace, taught that kindness from the enemy was impossible. But the truth lived in her memories now. Hot meals. Clean uniforms. Blankets. Music. People who remembered their names. People who treated them better than their own commanders had. Humanity behind barbed wire. Hannah realized that survival wasn't shameful. Compassion wasn't weakness. And the world was far more complicated, and far more hopeful, than she had ever been allowed to believe. Someday, she thought, she would tell the full story. Not the propaganda. Not the myth. The truth. And maybe, when the war ended, that truth would matter.